whatever you're selling, whatever business you have, be ethical and serve from the heart.
Hi everyone, I'm Juliet Peters. Welcome to Her Table, Her Rules. And this is a show where we really dive into women who are setting up their own table. Change makers, entrepreneurs, amplifying women's voices. And so I'm thrilled today to have Lea Woodford, who has built a number of businesses and really expert in the whole area of speaking on large stages. And that is something that when I was looking at the statistics, I was a little bit sort of sad that we're still at the point where we don't have parity of women speakers on large stages, and even more so in the tech industry where it's about 25-ish%.
Absolutely. It's still that way.
Yeah. So I really thought it would be great to have you sort of come on and talk about really how you put your expertise together to initially get on the big stages, right? And then to build a business around helping other people do that. So tell everyone a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm going to be really transparent. I built Speaker Life out of sheer frustration. I am what I would call a recovering media personality. And when my days in front of the camera were over, and I had been in the speaking industry, it's still like what you said. And I became a professional speaker in 2007. And there was a huge problem back then, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed. And I realized I just didn't like the lack of resources, I should say. There were resources, but they weren't good resources. Mm-hmm. And there are programs out there, but they're old, dated, political, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They don't really serve the consumer because the consumer is so tech savvy.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a younger demographic.
Yeah.
You know, they're way smarter than I am. So what I did in 2019, I decided to create Speaker Life to get me on stages.
Interesting.
And I didn't realize that the magazine not only would it get me on stages, but actually created an audience for me.
Interesting. So you kind of created your own sort of space.
I did,
Yeah.
because they're just, NSA, National Speakers Association, had a speaker magazine, and it wasn't professionally done. NSA is ran by volunteers, nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But coming from the media, I have different standards. And I just wanted something that was real.
Yeah.
And I wanted it beautiful because I come from the media and they're amazing at branding, but I wanted a go-to resource, especially for women. And even having the magazine, I still struggle to find good women to come and speak, not only on my stage, but in the magazine and the YouTube channel and the podcast.
So since you have so much really expertise around this, why do you think that is? Why do you think that that there aren't the women speakers out there, or that they're not getting the sort of air that they need to be able to put something together to appear on a large stage? Where's the disconnect there?
I think there's a couple of disconnects. I think corporate America pretty much is still the people that pay for keynotes.
Yeah.
And it's still, whether it's healthcare or tech, it's always going to be a man.
Yeah.
You might have a token female here and there, but it's that way. But even in the private sector, it's changed. It's now a pay to play. You have to pay to be on the stage. So those are the two dichotomies, unless you're like me and you have something to leverage. I can leverage the magazine.
Yeah.
And that's how, and I teach my clients, have something of value that is going to provide value for the audience that you can bargain, whether it's a podcast, whether it's something, but you have to have something that's not just you, but it's going to benefit not only the audience, but the person putting on the event.
Interesting. I heard you talking in another venue about sort of the mismatch between people who are typically at the experience level where they're going to be speakers are further along in their career. But the people who are doing the hiring are way at the beginning of their career. Right?
It's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true. Yes. And I have this talk with speakers all the time that I coach. I have a dear friend, and he won't mind if I tell this. He is an amazing speaker. He books about probably $1 million worth of talks. But he was still dressing like corporate 80s.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, would you mind if we updated your brand? I've got your business brand, but we need to actually get you where you're going to reach a younger target demographic, because the audience is younger and the event planners are younger.
Yeah.
And they don't resonate with the 80s three-piece suit. So, he's in dress jeans now, a sport coat, very polished. Now he's discovered he loves shoes, but he's getting booked. And it's funny because I made that suggestion to him, and I guess a couple of the speaker bureaus he was with and one of his event planners suggested the same thing. So now he walks the talk. But people, whether we like it or not, we're going to be judged by the way we look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I were still rocking my big 80s hair and some of the crazy outfits I wore, I probably wouldn't be on stage either. I might be somewhere else.
Right. So if you really are just thinking about starting kind of down the speaker journey, right? And as a woman, woman entrepreneur, where would you begin? What would be sort of the baby steps that you would take to do that?
First of all, find mentors, but also, is there somebody that you can emulate? Mm-hmm. Are you a Mel Robbins? Are you a Amy Porterfield? Who are you? And bring your own style into it. But instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, find somebody who's doing close to what you want to do, but don't copy them, but emulate them, but with your own personality and your own style. Because pretty much nothing is new anymore. Everything's rehashed. I'd also say do video. Mm-hmm. 90%, actually they say 70, but I'm pretty sure it's 90% of people find you through video. Social media, it's the bane of my existence, but it's also a necessity, and it's free.
Yeah, and I would imagine, though, that also hooks into the fact that the demographic that's booking, right, is
they're
younger.
looking at your social more than they are your website. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is, I know that's such a tricky thing for people, right? Social media, because a lot of people are really not down with having to sort of hawk their wares on social media, right? It's uncomfortable for people. It's not kind of how we came up and were taught to do business, right?
Well,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a different beast, and I call it a beast because it has to be fed daily. So it's problematic. I would say start with one platform and be consistent with it. I happen to love YouTube for a couple of different reasons. While all the other social media platforms change everything, Google owns YouTube, and it's therefore a search engine.
Yeah.
What happens when people want to know something? They research it. Where did they go? Google. Then they go right onto YouTube. So I'm a big fan of YouTube, plus it stays there. You post on Instagram, it's gone in 2 weeks, 30 days on Facebook. So YouTube, I think everybody needs to have a YouTube channel.
So if you're talking to, a woman business owner who wants to get started in speaking, but isn't really that comfortable at the front of a room, how do you baby step it? Because we should all have the ability to really be able to present our message, whether it's at the front of a room or if it's around a table, right?
Right.
That those communication goals are really the same, just the platform changes, right? So how do we get specifically women more comfortable with their own message and being able to kind of clearly set out their own message? How do you teach people to do that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you have to be comfortable with your message before you can put it out there. And it's really important to learn how to structure a talk. And I had a 7th grade debate teacher who did a great analogy. It's a train analogy. And the engine is actually the hook, the story of the name of your talk. The first car is your story, because the story is what connects with your audience. The next couple of cars are actually your teaching points, and the caboose is your offer. And you might not be selling something, but you could say at the end of your talk, hey, if this resonated with any of you, I'd love to talk to you at the back of the room. Yeah. What you want to do is get their information. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people just grandstand on the stage, especially new speakers, and they do a great talk, but they don't send their audience anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's probably one of the trickiest parts of adding speaking into your repertoire, right? Is that when you are an expert and you are doing something expertly, you're not thinking about ClickFunnels, capturing emails, that's not really where you're coming from. And I think sometimes that overwhelms people, just that whole process.
I think so too. Yeah. So I think, hey, if you want to know more information, meet me at the back of the room and have a conversation with people one-on-one and, collect their information, but get them on a discovery call. Yeah. I recommend that to all beginning speakers.
That's interesting. So, because obviously if you're speaking, you do have something ultimately that you
would hope
selling,
so.
Right? Right. Although, I don't know, sometimes I've heard speakers and they just are so amazingly, they have such an amazing story and they're not really selling anything, right? They're kind of teaching through their adversity story.
That's more of a keynote.
Yeah.
That's more of a keynote.
Explain the difference, because people may not, if they're not in the speaker world, they may not understand the difference between a keynote and somebody who's really using speaking as a way to build their business, yes. Right?
A keynote is where they pay you to speak on a stage and cover a certain topic.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to really sell anything in the back of the room. And where it's open mic, or even a pay to play, you have the opportunity to connect with them at the end of the talk. Yeah. And people say, I never speak for free. I've got to tell you, I've made more money from speaking for free. And I never consider it speaking for free. I think any time that you have the podium, it's privilege. But do you have a servant's heart? If you're not there to serve and it's all about self, that comes out every time. And that's one of the reasons I created Smart Femme, because I saw a lot of speakers that were just pitching, and that's not fun. That's not fun for the audience. But what I really like to do is, as a journalist, I want to know the backstory.
Right.
Yes. I'm always curious, and people love to talk. So if you can get them on a discovery call and just talk to them, have a conversation, because you're not really in the speaking business, you're in the people business.
Yeah, to go back to what you said, which I think was an important point I want to talk a little bit more about, and that is this idea of the business that you created with Smart Femme, and also just this idea that sometimes that salesy approach, which I have been in many rooms where male speakers are, over the topping, that's what I'll say, right? And it doesn't feel great. And I don't think that it resonates with women. And I don't think women speakers typically use that approach either.
No, they don't. There's a different approach. And it's funny, I just had a conversation this morning. We were talking about, she was asked to speak at a women's conference about domestic abuse. And it's a guy that's holding the conference, and he's doing most of it. Yeah. And I just think there's a disconnect there. I mean, that's such a vulnerable topic. And to have a man doing a whole domestic violence. It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to step back and say, is that where I want to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, Lea, you hit a really important point, and I think that's about alignment, right? Even though it might be a great opportunity, if you're not aligned with sort of the message of a, dude putting on a conference about domestic violence from
Right?
a women's perspective, right? That's not, as a speaker, it might be an amazing opportunity, but also is that in alignment
No.
for you, right?
No. It's totally not in alignment for
Yeah.
me. And I really think the problem is, and I've seen this, and I just talked to Colin Egglesfield about this. It's happening in the acting world, but it's happening in the speaking world. We're putting influencers instead of experts on stages.
Yes, right.
And they don't have the expertise, but they have the likes and the comments. And so we're confusing the speaking world with the influencers, and that's where there's a huge disconnect.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think that is like a bullseye, right? So I think women sometimes shy away from speaking because they don't consider themselves to be influencers, right? Or even have the level of expertise. Women always denigrate their expertise.
They always do.
Right? They always think they haven't got enough training, they haven't had enough cases, blah, 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 right? And we all do it. Even the most successful person, I do it, right?
I do it.
So, the first thing you do is doubt yourself, right? Is this really do I really have what it takes to do this? So how do we, who do have expertise, how do we make an impact when we're not necessarily influencers?
I say this to my clients all the time. You don't have to be viral. You just have to be visible to the right, to the right person. Most influencers that go viral are broke.
Right.
It's like making lightning strike twice.
Yeah.
You can't do it. However, the really good influencers, they're not influencers. They just have a great message that resonates. Mm-hmm. And they say it over and over and over again, maybe in different ways. But the more consistent you are, the better you're going to do.
Yeah. I think about sometimes the people I've followed on Instagram, for example, who are out there every day, what I'll call ministering, right? Their platforms are about positivity, not false positivity, but
Right.
they're real talking sort of, and maybe that's who I gravitate towards because I don't like the fakey fake, stuff.
Me either.
But I do agree, and I don't know if you ever read that book called The Death of Expertise, but I do believe we are in a kind of in the air where being an expert isn't enough.
I think it is enough.
Okay.
I think it is enough. I think that you just have to put yourself out there and you have to learn how to be comfortable doing it and doing it consistently.
What is the sort of number one thing that when you're working with a woman speaker that you see women use from a verbal communication style that may not necessarily be as effective or land as effectively? Is there any, do you even,
Yes,
is there
I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
They're so in their head that they're not connecting with the audience.
Yeah.
And they're not coming from a servant's heart.
Yeah.
If you're just there to present, you're going to fall flat.
Yeah.
If it isn't about your audience, you've already lost them before you've walked on the stage. I think that you have to serve because people are hungry for connection.
Absolutely. Right?
And we connect through stories, but you have to be a good storyteller.
Yeah.
And you have to make points. You don't have to be the best mechanically, but you do have to connect through the storytelling, but also I think you have to read your audience.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people that just speak to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that, and you and I both sort of share the old media background, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I think that's one thing that we have to active listen,
We do.
right? Because if you don't active listen, you miss something important
You
that
do.
the other person is saying, right? And I think when you begin to initially speak, or you are about the performance as opposed to what the audience is looking for. And so I think building talks with that in mind, and really when you said read the room, that's really important, because if you don't read the room, right, you're not giving an effective speech.
Well, and I really think you have to go in with an intention. My goal is to touch at least one person in that room.
Yeah.
If what I say touches one, and my favorite talk of all time, I'm a three-time cancer survivor, was speaking at National Cancer Society, and the VP came up to me and said, "We have a stage 4 cancer victim that loved your talk. Would you meet her?" Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And of course that was non-paid. I would
Right.
never charge them. She gave me a hug. She's a single mom of 4, stage 4
Wow.
cancer. And
Wow.
she hugged me so tight and said, "Your talk gave me the fight for one more day."
Yeah.
That's why I do it.
Right, exactly. I do think that, women often come from that place of wanting to serve, though. That's kind of our default. So
I don't think that's a fault. I think we just
no,
need
our
to channel.
default. It's the default to come from a place of service, right? But how do we channel that, to your point?
I think that we have to really change and reframe. If we don't offer people what we have, our gifts that can really help them, we're doing them a disservice.
And that is key, right? If you're withholding your authenticity, your authentic self, the gift that you have, and you're not bringing that to the table, right? You are doing the world a disservice.
You
right?
are, and think about who they may get, somebody who is totally awful if you're not there to serve. Like I said, I think that if you have the right heart, and if you can help that person, it's your duty to do it.
What gets you out of bed every day? What's your next thing that you're working on? I mean, what do you want to continue to do with your business and your platforms?
I really, in my heart of hearts, I made a promise to my daughter in 2009. When she was a freshman at NAU, I got the phone call because I was doing dating and relationship. I was a correspondent, and she says, "Why don't you use your God-given talents and your contacts to create something to educate and inspire women?" I'm committed to the education you're provided, but most of the girls that I go to school with have no idea what they want to do, but they can describe every single second of their wedding day. That is, I would say, etched into my brain. That conversation.
That darn patriarchy goes down hard, doesn't it?
And
really
it,
does.
as long as there's shows like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette,
Right.
she's right.
Yeah.
She's right.
Right.
So that's what, she's my why.
Yeah.
And all women.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I see is that, I see people, young women that come out of college and they really are bright and shiny, right? I mean, women, 60% of most graduate programs, undergraduate programs are women, right? We are the majority. And they come out bright and shiny. And I think they have a belief about what we're living in that isn't necessarily reality. And that goes down pretty hard around 30. When you're in about 5 or 6 years, it's a little painful, right? When you really see what's happening.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed, and it's us as women that we have to make that change.
Absolutely. So this is my last question for you. So you built your table, and what is the most important rule that you have at your table that you'd like to tell everyone?
Whatever you're selling, whatever business you have, be ethical and serve from the heart.
That's awesome. Lea, thank you so much for
My
your
pleasure.
openness and talking today about a really important issue. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Her Table, Her Rules.